Welcome to Battlefield 6. Now, I gotta tell you guys, when I was told that I was gonna get a week's early access to Battlefield 6, I was really excited and honestly a little bit worried. We have been down this road before where a Battlefield game looks phenomenal, has a decent beta, and then we get to release and it all goes falling apart. So when I was told that I could play the pre-Day Zero patch version of Battlefield 6, alarm bells started ringing a little bit. What do you mean a Day Zero patch? Is something wrong? Is something broken? Well, I was pleasantly surprised, because not only is Battlefield 6 absolutely fantastic in terms of multiplayer and a real return to form for the franchise, it also somehow got better with the Day Zero patch that released this morning as of making this video. Now to clarify, this entire video is primarily focused on multiplayer and Portal. I'm not really somebody who cares for single player, so if that's something for you, I basically didn't touch it. Now before I dive into everything, there's going to be lots of Battlefield 6 content here on this channel, including that controller guide that I know you guys are looking for, so please do subscribe, we're on the road to 200k, and drop a like as well. It supports an up-and-coming creator like me. We're going to talk about everything: multiplayer, maps, modes, the fact that this launch is surprisingly stable. But before I get into all that, I want to talk about the Day Zero patch. Now, I've had access to Battlefield 6 since about October 1st to just run around, play, try things, and see what it's all about. And initially, I was a little bit concerned about movement and gunplay, which felt like a step backwards from the beta, not a step forward. Flash forward to the Day Zero patch, and I don't know what DICE have done or Battlefield Studios have done, but I gotta tell you, it feels absolutely fantastic. This is the most responsive Battlefield to date, it's the most enjoyable in terms of gunplay to date, and I honestly think it eclipses even Battlefield 5 in terms of raw satisfaction for gunplay and gameplay. So if you're a veteran of the franchise, this is like Battlefield 3 and 4 on steroids. If you're new to the franchise, this is probably the gold standard for what Battlefield gameplay is going to feel like. So with that out of the way in terms of the Day Zero patch, let's talk about Battlefield 6's multiplayer and Portal. Now, multiplayer honestly just feels like a true return to form for the franchise. It's just a fun, enjoyable sandbox experience with lots of different weapons and arsenals of equipment for you to mess around with your friends in, and this is expanded on by Battlefield Portal, which we'll touch on a little bit more later, that just gives you control over how you want to play. Now, closed weapons and open weapons are totally available, but the critical thing about Battlefield's multiplayer is that there's no skill-based matchmaking. Wherever you decide to hop into the game, there is team balancing, but this isn't a controlled environment. They don't care about you being matched with some specific KD guy who's maximally sweaty. They just want you to jump into the sandbox and have fun. And even when I'm playing against, 60-something other content creators, I was still able to enjoy myself. Because at the end of the day with Battlefield, it's not necessarily about who can grind the most kills, it's about who's going to revive the most, who's the person who's engineering the vehicles. There is such a diverse array of things that you can do in Battlefield 6 to support your team, that it isn't all about the sweatiest KD kings. And I honestly think this is just great for the first-person shooter space, having a game that you can just sit back, relax, and chill with some friends again. And it feels like it's been something that's been missing from the entire franchise and just generally from the first-person shooter field for the last 5 to 6 years. So if you're somebody who's just even mildly interested in Battlefield 6, then this is the game for you, I think. I think this is the first time I can say for a good couple of years, not only have they stuck the landing in terms of multiplayer, and we will get into the details about the maps, and we will get in terms of like the modes and things like that, but there's just so much room for potential going forward into the future, including Season 1, which we're also going to be talking about. Not everything is perfect though, there are a couple of areas of concern that I will be touching on in this video, so don't worry, there are things that we have been thinking about, fellas. So let's start with the brand new maps that you've seen in the background here. We have Manhattan Bridge and Sebek City. Now, there are a couple of little concerns that I have with some of the newer maps, but these were the two I was most interested in. And the concerns are primarily around the flying space and wider play space for things like helicopters. I feel like the boundaries are a little bit too tight on those and probably will need amending after launch. But in terms of core gameplay, these maps are fantastic. Manhattan Bridge is a really, really good map. It combines some infantry fighting with tanks and IFVs and has an attack helicopter that can scour the rooftops and take out opponents, whilst providing things that feel very Battlefield 3 in terms of styling. Some of the inner areas of this map feel very much Grand Bazaar-like oriented. Having these buildings that collapse that feel very atmospheric feels fantastic. Having the storefronts that can be completely blown to pieces. It's just a great map. Like, this is, for me, an A to S tier map that I think people are really going to enjoy. And I think Manhattan Bridge kind of speaks for itself. Like, I think it truly is, like, one of the better Battlefield 6 maps, and it is pretty medium in terms of size. Like, I didn't feel like it was a small map. It didn't concern me the way some of the other maps have been concerning me in terms of size and scale. So it's definitely smaller than something like Mirak Valley and Operation Firestorm, or in a sort of similar vein to those, but it's not small to an extent where I'm like, oh my god, we're playing Battlefield CQB. Then we move on to Nusabek City. And Nusabek City is basically if Gulf of Oman didn't have a beach landing and was just primarily the city area. This is a really fun map, and I had a lot of time with it that felt really, really good. You have these sort of shells of tower blocks that can be knocked down or absolutely blown to pieces, with a backdrop of the actual pyramids of Egypt. And then in between, you've got these great little passing lanes for infantry to move in between these blocks, use the zip lines to get up to the top of them internally, and sort of create this sort of multi-play space where transport helicopters feel important, attack helicopters feel important, the actual tanks themselves feel important in the IFVs. It just feels like a good combined arms map. This does unfortunately mean that there are only 3 maps at launch that actually cater towards jets: Liberation Peak, Mirak Valley, and Operation Firestorm. But there are some maps coming in Season 1 of Battlefield 6 that are likely going to remedy this quite early, and whilst it isn't the best thing for launch to only have 3 maps with jets, at the same time, we do have some bigger maps on the horizon that will further that combined arms experience, and the launch package for Battlefield 6 feels very reminiscent of some of the launch packages for Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3, where we start off with some of those balanced play spaces with a bit of infantry and a bit of ground vehicles. We have some of the larger play spaces that feature absolutely everything, and then we have the smaller play spaces that cater towards primarily infantry-focused experiences. I will say that in general, Battlefield 6 is leaning towards a specific time to action, and they're leaning towards a specific time to engagement. To sort of strip away the fallacy that Battlefield is a boring game where it's just running around and doing nothing, there are some tightened play spaces in this to try and make this game feel a little bit more action-packed. But it hasn't lost its identity in doing so. Operation Firestorm in particular is fantastic, Mirak Valley is fantastic, I really enjoyed Manhattan Bridge, and the escalation layouts to these maps, which we'll talk about that mode in a minute, is truly fantastic for people who are veterans of the franchise. Now, for some of you, jets taking a bit of a back burner might be inexcusable, and I totally understand that, and I also feel as though there are some other issues with jets, like a current lack of customization, which might be a bug, but we'll talk about that in a little bit, that makes Battlefield 6 not really feel like a true combined arms experience. But for me personally, as a long-time enjoyer of the franchise, I actually loved all of these. I think they were all fantastic. I think the actual launch package for the game is really appealing and appeals to a wide variety of spaces across the Battlefield community. The guys who love their Metro-style experiences, the guys who love their Firestorm-style experiences, and also the guys who are just looking for something in between. But I think what it does really impressively is something that I've been asking the franchise to do for a really long time, which is to take the gunplay and the enjoyable gameplay of Battlefield 3 and 4 and combine it with the atmosphere of something like Battlefield 1. Now granted, Battlefield 1 is very much in a league of its own. We're talking about a game in terms of atmosphere and cinematic pieces that, in my experience, has probably been unrivaled since its release. But from the look of this video and some of the stuff you guys have seen in the background, the helicopters crashing, the fronts of buildings coming down, the fact that when you drag one of your friendly teammates to revive him, a trail of blood is left behind on the floor, the fact that your weapon kicks up blood when you get shot and it splashes onto your own gun, they have genuinely nailed it. This is the closest they've gotten to replicating that Battlefield 1 style atmosphere in a modern environment, and it's honestly incredibly impressive. I did also try the smaller map that's on the Gibraltar variant. It's truly carnage. This is essentially their equivalent of something like Shipment. So, you know, it's not personally for me, but I'm confident some people will enjoy it, and I'm sure some cool Portal creations will come out of that. Now, before we dive into the modes, which is obviously another key segment of this game, I want to quickly touch on stability, because Battlefield 6 is really stable at launch from my experience. Now, I do want to say that this could scale upwards when more of you get access to it, when more of us are on the servers, when different types of hardware configurations are getting involved. The game might have some faults in places. But for me, both playing on PlayStation 5 and playing on PC, I really enjoyed it. The performance is amazing, by the way. Like, obviously, I know I have a killer rig at a 9800X3D and a 5090, but I was clocking well over 250 frames in this game, and I'm confident people who are on lower-end rigs who are using DLSS quality or not even using DLSS at all are going to have a really optimized experience at launch that graphically looks really good even on lower settings. On PlayStation 5, I didn't feel like in performance mode that I was being held back by the game. It felt equally as responsive or as responsive as a console experience can, which is a really positive sign. You know, in my experience, sometimes when I play certain games on PC and then I play it on PlayStation, the rift is absolutely massive. This rift didn't feel as massive. Granted, the hardware difference is always going to create a massive difference in terms of how those two experiences handle, but in terms of being a console gamer, I think you guys will be pretty satisfied. Now, I have no word on what the Xbox S experience is going to look like, but as far as I'm aware, the Series X experience should be fairly similar or comparable to the PlayStation 5 experience. Let's talk about the modes. Now, I'm not really a big Breakthrough enjoyer, but they have made some changes to Breakthrough on some of the maps, like Liberation Peak. So that was a mode that I kind of didn't play a lot of. It's not my favorite, it's not a mode I gravitate towards. But the mode I actually found myself enjoying the most in Battlefield 6 is their brand new mode, Escalation. For those of you who haven't seen Escalation yet, it's essentially a scaled-up version of Conquest where kills don't matter in terms of scoring. Escalation is about having priority map control over the majority of the map by capturing the majority of the objectives in order to start ticking points towards a score. Hit 3 points and your team wins the game, and it creates some really knife-edge results. But what's great about Escalation is not only are the layouts particularly wider and tend to be a little bit larger than some of even the Conquest variants, but the game actually progressively ramps up in terms of intensity. More vehicles start spawning in. You can get more tanks, more helicopters, more jets. It progressively ramps up throughout the mode as the game reaches its apex to literally create an escalation of events. I am somebody who absolutely adores Conquest. It is my go-to mode for Battlefield, and I actually think I'll be playing Escalation over Conquest. And I think that's a real sign of success for the development team, who have tried making iterations on Conquest of the past, like Conquest Assault, and have never really been successful. But Escalation, I'm all for. I think it's a really good mode, and I really enjoyed it. Conquest is Conquest. It feels pretty great. If you enjoy Conquest, you're probably going to enjoy Conquest in Battlefield 6. I think there are a lot of question marks around some of the more linear modes this year, though. Breakthrough, I feel, can be quite intense, but sometimes pretty unbalanced, and what I did play from this version of the game still lives up to that. Breakthrough is frustrating, but I think that's just an inherent thing of Breakthrough, which is kind of why I don't really play it. There was also a close quarters mode that primarily leaned towards things like squad deathmatch, which I also didn't really touch because it's just not for me, but there was a distinct absence from Rush in the current launch version of the game, and I think that's because the developers very much heeded the feedback that we had provided, that Rush wasn't really leaning in the right direction, and I think they've gone back to the drawing board, which for me is a massive positive. One of the issues of Battlefield in the past is just that whenever this sort of feedback comes up, they just sort of leave it in, don't really address it, and things don't really improve. This time around, Rush looks like it's getting some polish before it returns to our fold, and I'm really happy to see that. Next, let's move on to the weapons. There is a pretty diverse array of weapons in Battlefield 6 at launch, and all of them feel quite unique, have good customization options, and the customization system itself feels balanced, giving you a certain type of score for more powerful attachments that will make your gun more controllable or perform in a certain way. This is probably the best customization system we've had in a while. It just feels fun. The optics are much cleaner now. They've also had the actual reticles brightened inside them, so it doesn't look like you're staring down a blank napkin. And generally speaking, it's a little bit of a jump forward from the Battlefield 6 beta. There are more attachments, lots of different stylings, the optics are looking cleaner, and I'm a big fan of how these weapons are feeling as of the Day Zero patch. If you're somebody who plays on keyboard and mouse, you'll have a really responsive, reactive experience. If you're somebody who plays on controller, you can watch my controller settings guide to get a very reactive, responsive experience, which will be releasing today just after this video. And on top of all of this, we have 5 other weapons coming to the launch lineup of the game in just over 2 weeks with Season 1. Now, they are obviously releasing on like a more weekly schedule, but it's great to see that we have new content on the horizon already, and it's great to see that the overall launch package for these weapons feels different, feels diverse, and feels pretty fun. Moving on to vehicles, where things get a little bit more patchy and a little bit more questionable in terms of the overall release package for Battlefield 6. Now, for tanks and IFVs, Battlefield 6 is great. Having actual loadouts that you can configure for those specific vehicles and switch those loadouts quickly before spawning into your favorite vehicle is a really great choice. The IFVs and tanks feel responsive, they feel really well balanced, and they actually feel powerful for once, as opposed to previous Battlefield games that have tried to make vehicles feel terrible for no particular reason. In terms of the attack helicopters, it's more of the same. Attack helicopters with customizable loadouts, things that you can work with, and I'm a massive fan of us seeing the return of transport helicopters with miniguns on the side that actually feel powerful and can handle being hit by more than one missile. These are Bad Company 2 era style transport helicopters, and I think they're going to be a huge success amongst the audience. But then things get a little bit spotty when we start talking about jets and also the clear lack of a little bird. Now, at the moment with the jets, you cannot customize them in terms of loadouts at all, which is very strange considering it was something that you could do in Battlefield Labs. Now, there is a bug in relation to jets at the minute where air-to-air missiles were essentially working through flares, so I can only assume that they have turned off the customization options for these vehicles for the time being in order to deal with that situation and patch that before the game releases or possibly just after launch. It does feel as though there's meant to be jet customization, but as of this current moment of making this video, it is not in the game. Again, which is really odd because it was in Battlefield Labs. So I feel like this is probably a bit of bug quashing and probably them dealing with something that popped up before the release of the game. And I don't have official word on that, but that is probably likely the case. And if I do get official word on it, I will post it in the comment section down below. But finally, there is no little bird in Battlefield 6. A very key component of the Battlefield franchise is not in the game. It has, however, been acknowledged in the Season 1 blog post that they have heard the audience's appeal for a little bird. They know that people want little birds back in Battlefield, and it is something that they are actively monitoring alongside naval warfare as well, which is something that immediately kind of propped up in my head as, oh, they're acknowledging naval combat already in Season 1? Now, look, at the end of the day, at day 1, Battlefield 6 will not have naval combat like Paracel Storm, and it will not have a little bird, so the launch package is a little bit sparse in that regard. But it's safe to say that they are listening for once, the ear is to the ground, and even the new maps that are coming for Battlefield 6 in Season 1 are even on the larger scale of things and are going to be combined arms maps, which is going to continue to foster towards the community who are clearly looking for certain things. I understand that for some of you, the current lack of jet customization is not forgivable, and for some of you who just probably main little birds, not having a little bird might feel like a shot in the heart. But on the whole, as somebody who just plays a bit of everything with Battlefield, as somebody who loves his helicopters, loves his tanks, tends to play a little bit of everything as a combined arms player, I'm really enjoying Battlefield 6 as a launch package. And I definitely won't apologize for that opinion either. I know some people are already typing in the comment section, this guy's a shill, he's saying everything's going to be fixed in Season 1. That's definitely not the case. The launch package is the launch package. There are some parts of it that some of you won't like, but there are other parts of it that I think the vast majority of you are going to appreciate. Finally, let's talk Battlefield Portal and Season 1. Battlefield Portal is definitely something that I have a lot of question marks around. In terms of just making basic custom experiences like infantry-only breakthrough, like escalation where you disable certain vehicles, or maybe having a shotguns versus sniper mode, Portal's easy. It makes perfect sense. You can have a persistent server that always stays online. You could do pretty much all of that. You can create a custom Battlefield experience where you've got 300% sprint speed and only knives, and it's really easy to do on the web browser. But Battlefield Portal, in terms of what it's capable of as a map editor, what it's capable of in terms of custom scripting and creating custom modes, that's the bigger question mark, because those things are going to take time, and they might not necessarily work very well straight away. Now, because Battlefield Portal has essentially two parts to it. One part that is a basic mode customizer that's going to let you host experiences for you and your pals, and the other part that's essentially an advanced coding level suite that's going to let you make customizable game modes. The second part has a lot of red flags and question marks around it because it's basically down to us. Obviously, some of it in terms of execution and stability is down to the development team, but in terms of actually creating custom modes, scripting them, getting them working properly and putting them live, that is kind of on the community. And whether or not we have custom maps and custom scripted experiences that work well, that's a community-led and community-created thing. Now, it's my understanding that the guys over at DICE are going to be posting some of their own experiences at the release of this game and pushing some of them forward in order to showcase a little bit more of what Battlefield Portal is capable of. But in terms of the value proposition for Portal, the potential is through the ceiling. But in terms of what you're going to get at launch, it's going to feel pretty bland because it's going to take time. You're going to have to get guys in who have some time and experience with the Godot editor, guys who need experiences learning how the scripting software is going to work and testing and executing it. But when it does come out and when people are actually getting their teeth into this, I really think the potential for something special is very much here in Battlefield 6. Now, at release, I'm going to be hosting some of my more immersive custom experiences for Battlefield 6 that will be disabling the predominant levels of the HUD in the game and giving you guys a more immersive experience that lets you enjoy the beauty of your surroundings. And that's something that I will be doing hopefully from day one. But in terms of creating custom modes, that's something that I'm looking to hire some coders for in the future to see what's possible. And finally, Season 1. We have 2 new maps as well as a new limited time mode, which seems to be a winter style event, and 5 new weapons on the horizon coming for Battlefield 6. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Season 1 because I feel as though it's something for the future, but it looks like we're actually finally going to get a decent content cadence for this game, and there is also potentially something else that has been revealed, teased, but not quite formally announced that's on the horizon for Battlefield 6, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So folks, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a subscribe, please leave a like. I'm very much on the road to 200k, and I want to be your go-to destination for Battlefield 6. So thank you for being here, thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you again in the next one.